on stream
I'm
yet
ready.
first. Okay, sweet.
Okay.
Yay. Let me invite people.
Oh, hold on. Let me open a second notepad.
Oh, good. Nate, have you done lives before?
No, but I mean, I've been in journalism, so I'm used to being live, but I've never done like a live
Did you guys get the invite?
on Instagram.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm waiting for our guest speakers to come on live. Just hold on a bit. You can wave. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Angus joined.
I didn't get the invite, so I'm going to request.
You didn't? Wait.
So I
invite?
just requested.
I wonder if I can invite more than one. I should be able to.
I think you can invite at least 3, I think, or something.
Hi,
So I sent
you
a request.
Someone tuning in from accept. Accept. Why is Nate unable to join us?
I hit request. I hit the request button.
Oh yeah, we've got accept. Let's see.
I think I'm almost lined up, but
Okay. Okay, hang on, guys.
Hey guys. Hey Chris. Hey Sam. Go back to work.
Hi, Chuban. Yeah, we've got some people tuning in from YouTube as well. Nate, I can get you on. Accept.
all right.
Invite.
Yeah, I have it.
We're just waiting for some guests to arrive. Hang in there. Let me know where you guys are from. Where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. Nate is unable to join. Well, it's okay then. Can we? Do you know why?
Hold on. Let me exit and go back in.
Okay. Singapore. Yeah, very nice. Chewing. Well, it's nice people are tuning in from YouTube as well. Let me know on Instagram where you guys are tuning from.
Okay, I sent another request.
Excellent. Australia. Yeah, Inca's in Australia. And I'm back in Singapore. Every single week we're in a different place.
Location, yeah.
Nate, I can't seem to accept it.
That's weird.
Or add Nate in first and then see if that works.
Can you? Can try.
No, I can't.
But anyway,
you can.
Our topic today is about living in Mexico versus Bali. So if any of you have any questions, drop it in the comments and we will get them answered. But we'll also kind of talk a bit about our own experiences and how we navigate living abroad. Nate, did you get my invite?
I didn't receive an invite. No. I'll try one more time. Yeah. So.
Is your app updated maybe?
Should be.
Yeah, request her again and see if it works. Let's see.
Yeah. This is the third time. Oh, we're good.
You see the request?
Yeah, I get the request and then I can accept, but it doesn't come in.
Yeah, it shows that you accepted, but I can't see myself on there.
Well, it's okay. We can.
I'll just stay on here.
Yeah, that's fine. That's awesome. Yeah, actually, we have Nate. Well, he can't be live on Instagram, but he's live on YouTube, and maybe you can always comment on our Instagram live. Anyway, exciting because I am back in Singapore. Yinka is living in Australia now, and Nate is calling in from Guadalajara, Mexico. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
in right now.
Very cool. Yeah, so today we kind of wanted to talk a bit about living in Mexico versus Bali. I know Mexico is a very popular hotspot, especially people in, do you call it an Eastern time zone? People who kind of
Yeah,
work
like
around,
in North
yeah,
America.
North
yeah, work around North
America.
America time zone.
Uh-huh.
Do you wanna introduce yourself a bit, Nate? What do you do? Where you're from? How did you end up in Mexico?
Well, yeah, when I first started traveling, I spent a lot of time in Mexico, Central America, South America. So but I still did some traveling in Europe. Um, but I always kept gravitating back, I guess, to Mexico.
Yes,
Oh, wait, hold on.
I got you to join.
Yeah, hold on. There we go. I think,
Yay!
okay, I just muted my phone. But I think everyone can still hear me. But yeah, I spent a lot of time traveling in Mexico and Central America and Latin America, mostly Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. So it's kind of something I always felt pretty strongly with. And as I was traveling, my Spanish slowly built up, and I spent a lot of time in different places. But I just kept coming back to Guadalajara. It's just a place I kind of had. I don't know. I felt strongly about it. I already met a lot of cool people there. I had a lot of friends there, like local friends, Mexican friends, and in terms of like the weather, their culture, their quality of life, like ease of access to a lot of things. And yeah, it's just something I kept coming back to, and I had at that point spent a lot of time, like 1 month at a time, 2 months at a time, and different places in Latin America. But in my mind, I always just yeah, kept coming back to Guadalajara. That's what. And then about 2 years ago, I decided I first came to Guadalajara like a little over 5 years ago, and then about 2 years ago, I would say I made up my mind that I would start to go through the process of like settling in Guadalajara, and now I have temp residency and I'm starting a business here as well. So I'll be here for a while.
That's very nice. Nate, are you on live?
Yeah, can you hear
Can
me?
everyone see?
I think I'm on Instagram, or I was added to the group, but if not, that's fine. But
Yeah.
I think there's a box for you there, but we don't see.
I keep hearing the echo.
Yeah, you have to turn on one of the voice. But are you did you turn off your video?
That's it. But hold on.
Can see a split
Yeah,
screen. Who else?
hold on. I'm
Guys, what do
definitely
you
a
see on
host.
Instagram?
it's split screen.
Nate is like a
So I
ghost.
see like
I'm
Nate's here,
mysterious.
but
All right. I'm gonna keep
I
going.
can't
I'll
see
search
anything.
for this really quick to see what's wrong.
Okay, no problem. Oh yeah, okay. So Inga, you've also lived substantially in Mexico. Was it primarily Tulum?
Actually, funny enough, mostly lived in Tijuana, then Tulum. So I lived in Tijuana for 2.5 years first. Um, I was also exposed to Juarez for a bit since I used to live in El Paso when I was in college, and I used to go to Juarez like really frequently with my best friend slash Mexican family and stuff. And then eventually, when I moved out to the West Coast to California, San Diego, I got tired of SD and moved to TJ, and then lived in TJ for 2.5 years. Did to work in the States, but I was living in Mexico. It was such a great experience, amazing. Then after I left my 9 to 5, I moved down south to Tulum for 9 months or thereabouts. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I have so many questions there because I've heard that Tijuana and Juarez are not the safest places in Mexico to be.
Yeah, so they say. But I don't think it's true. Um, from my experience, I had a great time in you know, the very I should say it's not true. I think it's ultimately just like stay there. You should felt in the States. So at least like in the US, I definitely felt safer in Mexico than I definitely felt in the States for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. So it got cut off a little bit. So it had to do with you kind of living in the States, and that's why it was kind of convenient to shuffle between the US and the States.
Yeah, because I lived at the border, so it just made sense to be able to go from
Mm,
TJ to San Diego regular every day, and it's a common thing. It's a trend that has been around for a bit, and people do that.
why? What made you do that? Living down to Mexico instead of staying in the States?
For one, Mexico is a lot. What's the word? Are you guys having issues with my microphone? Sorry, one second. Let me put this one in instead.
Now it's okay, but sometimes it like ticks. Can you guys hear Inka
It's
okay?
okay. Sorry, guys, for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, everything's
I
good.
will. Is it okay? I'll do this right now so then we have a better audio.
I personally, my Mexico story, because Mexico, for the most part, allows visitors to visit up to 6 months. So it was during COVID that I was there, and I was living mostly in Oaxaca and Puerto Escondido. Visited a bit of, yeah, the coast of Playa del Carmen, of Tulum, of Cancun, but I feel like that area is more touristy. So that's why I was curious about Inca living in Tulum. Um, if you guys have any questions about living in Mexico, feel free to shoot them in the comment box. Yeah,
And
Oaxaca is
yeah,
great.
yeah,
Nate, yes?
I can add something about. I know you're asking before about safety in Mexico. Yeah, I mean, obviously you do hear stories, but I mean, for me, like I don't like party a lot. I mean, I don't do drugs. I don't drink a lot. So I think just based on that alone, I mean, that
Yeah,
keeps like 99% of the issues you might encounter like in Mexico or pretty much like anywhere else. I mean, and yeah, of course, sometimes you do hear stories of like stuff happening, but for me,
mm,
I just I follow my own rules. I like if it's late at night, okay, maybe take a Uber home instead of walking home. Like sometimes you have situations like that, but I mean, in Guadalajara, I've never really had problems. Of course, sometimes you do hear stories, but yeah, as long, but again, I'm not partying a lot. I'm not going crazy. So I think if you're not looking for trouble, then in most cases, trouble's not going to find you. And that goes for like Mexico or and pretty much any other country, I would say.
yeah. Why Guadalajara though? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think when I first came there, I met a lot of cool people there. I ended up building a lot of having a lot of Mexican friends there, so that was something good. And kind of going off what you said, Guadalajara, I guess, wasn't as touristy as some of the other Mexican cities, even though it's still a really big city. The quality of life, I think, in Guadalajara is really high, and the weather there is also really nice for about 9 or 10 months of the year, which is about I think is higher than a lot of other Mexican cities. So I mean, culture, of course, goes without saying. Jalisco and a lot of the surrounding states are very rich in culture. There's lots of different festivals and cultural events happening as well. Um, and yeah, I think it's there's a lot of things to like about it, but I think I do have a lot of local friends here, and it gave me a place to like where I could feel comfortable, and then also establish myself and like do other stuff as well, and then yeah, now I'm starting my own business here, and I'm excited to see how that progresses. So.
Yeah, that's great. I
Nice.
think from what I hear from what other people say about Guadalajara, it's like a higher quality of living because people there kind of earn a bit more money and there are a lot of mountains and the weather is cooler. Am I right getting this impression of Guadalajara?
Oh, not as cool as Mexico City, but because Mexico City, I think gets a little too chilly in the winter, especially in December.
Yeah.
Now, I think in Guadalajara, like the weather is like perfect because in the winter it doesn't get like super cold outside of maybe like 2 or 3 weeks this year at like the end of December, early January. But now like the weather is pretty much perfect. Like you get many days of like 25, 26, 27 degree highs, and then it's like 10, 11 degrees at night. So you get that when you get that for for most of the year. I mean, you can't really complain. So.
Ooh, Shuyan is asking maybe debunk the perception of Narcos from Narcos Mexico. I think it was the Netflix show, right?
Well, yeah. I think
Yeah.
that show was based on like the Jalisco. And yeah, I've had people ask me like, "Oh yeah, Narcos Mexico. It's based in Guadalajara," and people are always wondering about that. And like, yeah, there is technically like in a lot of places in Mexico there is a cartel presence, but they're not going to be in the center of like cities. They're going to be battling each other on like the border, I guess, other states. But I mean, again, if you don't go looking for trouble, if you're not looking for these kind of people, they're not going to find you. So, and
Yeah.
even
Correct.
somehow accidentally encounter them, they're going to realize like, oh, this guy isn't from here. We're not gonna mess with him. Keep moving, keep going along. That sort of thing.
Does Tijuana also get that kind of impression? Because I have heard that people go down south to Tijuana to like deal drugs and things like that from the US. So is it considered
Absolutely.
unsafe?
Absolutely. I think Tijuana and Juarez were once considered like two of the most violent cities in the world at some point. But then, even when I was moving there, a lot of people were saying it's very unsafe, it's very this, it's very that. Same thing with the whole Narcos thing. There's a lot of all that stuff there. But just like how Nate said, if you don't look for trouble, trouble is not necessarily coming to look for you. These people have their own groups and what they're already doing, and like they know their places. Also, a lot of these places are heavily policed, and you actually feel safe. I know at first, as a tourist or as a foreigner, when you first move, you see a lot of police with like their AK-47s and all these things going around, so you get a little scared. However, actually, if I don't see that, that's when I get scared, because
Yeah.
that means maybe I'm not really in safe hands, right? So once I see cops and I see their AK-47, boom, 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 I feel at peace. Like I'm not even worried, because then I know more than likely like there's security around. But even without that, still they're like, yeah, I think the chances of you being involved in their altercations is very low, but that does not mean that you might not be there. Like you can be in these situations, depending on, you could be at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's the same way how in the States or any other country, you could be walking and like you could get in an accident. You could get, come on, in the States, there's a lot more mass shootings than we've seen in probably any other country. So we can even say that like the States is much safer than Mexico. But then I know there's a whole thing about women. There's a whole thing about, as again, like being a Black person. There's a lot of different factors that comes into place for everyone. Like I know Mexico feels safer. I mean, feels safer for me as a Black man than the States. But then as a woman, I've heard a lot of things like the States feels a lot safer for them than in Mexico. So there's a lot of different factors that comes into these things. But yeah, there's cartels everywhere, but cartels ain't coming for you guys.
Yeah, I wish. No, I don't wish. But yeah, if you guys, if you haven't been to Mexico, one thing that quite took me aback was the fact that the police, when they patrol in cars and they carry like those big guns. I wonder if they're for show or if it's really effective. But yeah, it can be quite intimidating, no?
It's definitely effective. Those guns are actually definitely working.
Yeah, it's more used as a deterrent, and like I said, you see this a lot in the cities, and like in general, like you never see like any like major issues. I mean, maybe before the pandemic, you might have heard it like a little bit, but I think since the pandemic and after that, I think a lot of the petty crime and those issues in Mexico like dropped a lot.
That's good.
I think in a lot of countries it might have gone up, whereas Mexico it kind of stayed the same, or at least a lot of that petty crime kind of dropped a little bit. At least that's what I've seen on like since I've been here, the stories I've heard and stuff like that. I don't hear as many like petty theft stories like happening as much or those sort of things. I'm not saying it doesn't like still happen. It seems like in Mexico, it seems like that sort of thing went away a lot or dropped off quite a bit since the pandemic.
Yeah. I kind of want to address the elephant in the room, right? Which is the language barrier. How do you guys navigate if the Spanish Mexican language is the primary form of language in Mexico?
Yeah. Nate, do you want to go or should I go?
Yeah, you can go first.
For me, actually, before moving to Mexico, I learned Spanish. I was not moving to a country and I was not learning the language. So I made a point of interest to learn Spanish, to speak Spanish. Again, I lived in a border city beforehand. Both, I guess. I lived in El Paso at first. So I learned Spanish in El Paso. And then from that, I also got to visit, again, Juarez very often and like Chihuahua a lot. So I was able to practice my Spanish like pretty well. And then I asked my Mexican dad, I was like, hey, when I move out to California, if I don't like it, because the cost of living was also very expensive, do you recommend if I move down to TJ? He said, of course, you do very fine. Like, I have no issues with you because of like the way you're able to just like communicate and get things even around us. Like, you're going to be very fine by yourself. So there's not going to be any problem. So I actually made an effort to learn the language before moving out to Mexico. And it was I would say probably the best decision I could have ever made for me personally.
Yeah, and kind of going off that, like before I kind of decided to like stay in Mexico and start working online there, I was traveling a lot in Spanish speaking countries. And then like my Spanish like wasn't the greatest, but I think once I started to settle a little bit and start to go to different meetups and interact with different people and kind of immerse myself, I feel like my Spanish like got a lot better. And of course, I've been here a while. My Spanish isn't fluent, but it's like I think it's like intermediate level. I still make mistakes, but in general, I can still like understand what everyone's saying. I mean, I've gone on dates with people who don't speak English, and I've had no issues. We can still carry on like normal conversation. Um, and yeah, so for me in general, yeah, obviously, when you go to these countries, it's important to know some words of the local language because it makes and the interactions with the locals a lot better, a lot more genuine, and especially when you can both understand each other. And yeah, I mean, I speak Spanish, but it's still mostly with gringo accent. So most people will pick up right away that, my gringo, which is fine. But I think they appreciate that I'm putting in the effort. I'm trying. That I'm
Yeah.
effort in the country. So
I think one of the saving graces is definitely the a presence of language exchange groups. I find that especially in foreign speaking countries, I noticed that also in Bali, where you can practice Bahasa in organized groups. And for sure, anywhere in non-English speaking countries where there are gringos, where there are foreigners around living, there are always these language exchange groups that you can be part of. And it's a great way to make friends as well as practice and exchange languages.
Absolutely.
and yeah, going off that, like I know in Guadalajara, like one of my friends here, he does organize a lot of language exchange meetups, which is good. And even before that, I would go to a lot of like couch surfing meetups, local meetups, and that's how I met a lot of local people and made a lot of friends, local friends that way. There's also like meetups. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can go out and meet local people or interact with local people and make local friends. Going to these kind of events. And then me personally, I've tried to be a bit more active in the community, like going to these meetups and recently I started organizing a trivia night in Guadalajara as well. So that's been really fun to organize. It's kind of interesting because when I tell Mexicans I'm organizing a trivia night, they don't. Some of them don't quite understand what it's all about. But then once they participate, once I get more of them to show up, everyone's having fun, and that's the important thing. But yeah, I try to help be part of the local community, organizing my own events, like supporting local businesses and that sort of stuff as well. Doing that sort of thing is I feel like is important, especially if you're in a place for an extended period of time.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
I'm going to interject here for all those who are new or who just joined. We're here during a live stream talking about living in Mexico versus Bali, and we do this weekly live stream. Yinka and I, we do this weekly live streams about traveling tips. How to equip yourself to travel smarter and better and more responsibly. So if you guys are interested, definitely hit the follow or the subscribe button wherever you're tuning in from. So on that note, I kind of want to talk a bit about, like, Nate, besides Mexico, have you lived in Bali before
I've
or
not been
visited?
but I've lived in a lot of different places in Latin America. So like
Yeah, and you're originally from the
Bogota,
US.
Lima, Panama City.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm from the United States. So.
United States. And Yinka is from Nigeria/Canada. So I think
Okay.
back to the original question, like, what made you guys leave your home country to live in another country like Mexico or Bali?
Oh, okay. I'll
Nate?
go for. Well,
Sorry.
well, yeah, I was working in the U.S. I wouldn't say I did. I was kind of in a rough position there, and while I was working there, I was already thinking like, okay, I want to quit this job to like start traveling. But before I quit, they ended up laying me off. It was like end of the year, so I'm like, oh, I think I still might have enough money to travel with the money I saved. And so that's what I did. I ended up traveling for a year and a half. Most of it was kind of in Latin America, though I did spend some time in Europe as well. And then once I was finished, I was like, okay, I want to start working online. And I decided that I would pretty much start working on start working online while I was in Guadalajara. And then it just kind of like spiraled from there. And like at that point, I spent a lot of time in Guadalajara, but I also like kept trying other places. But I kept coming back I kept comparing to Guadalajara, and at that point I still kind of preferred Guadalajara when it came to living. Like again, the reasons people, the weather, the culture, like activities, quality of life. I mean, yeah, I've met a lot of great people here, and I think that's one of the reasons why I kept coming back. And I want to kind of establish a base and build my community here, and eventually start my own business. So.
Yeah, and for me, I guess I left my home countries. I have two. First, because I was an athlete, so I got a scholarship to run in the States. So I ended up moving to the US first from Canada and / Nigeria. I left Nigeria because family wanted more opportunities for me and my siblings, my parents. So we moved to Canada for that reason. I left Canada for more opportunities for my personal self as an athlete and my engineering career. And it was, one of the best decisions ever. I finished my athletics career and then got a great paying job in the States, probably being underpaid. But anyways, I knew that I wanted to also travel. I've always been a nomad my whole life, pretty much. I've traveled since I was a kid. I was exposed to traveling. And eventually, once I was doing the whole 9 to 5 thing, which was more like a 9 to 9 kind of thing, or 6 to 6, like a lot
Not
of
pleasant.
hours a week. No, it was more than 12 hours. Like I legit worked, anyways, 60 to 80 hours a week. And yeah, like you quickly realize that you don't want this for your life forever. Like it's not sustainable. So I really quickly wanted to be able to go remote. And during the middle of pandemic, I already moved to Mexico, and so that was great. And then in the middle of pandemic, I was just like, I want to do Mexico full time, and quit my job and left. But I already kind of had a plan in my head roughly for about 2 years. So it wasn't like I just woke up one day and just left. No, I had a rough idea in my head for 2 years and then was working towards a goal and left after about 2 years or 2.5. And at least after 3 years of working, left and came to Mexico. After Mexico, I was like, let's go try out Asia and see how it is. I know Mexico is always home. I have no issues with Mexico. So Mexico is like, this is my standard. So if anything is not hitting Mexico's standard, I'm not like, yeah. So then I moved to Bali, and unfortunately, Bali did not hit the Mexico standard. So
Wait.
now
What
I
is
find
the Mexico standard?
for me personally,
Yeah.
I wanted a place where I felt at home. There's a feeling that Mexico gives you that I cannot explain. And I think that feeling goes back to Nigeria. So Mexico feels like Nigeria, but developed. like a more developed Nigeria. Like it feels like a Nigeria that should be working that's not currently happening in Nigeria fully. I have a mixture of local, I have a mixture of city modernization, I have a mixture of like it's huge. Mexico is huge. It's man, to dive into Mexico is crazy. Like I really did this deep dive into wanting to learn the culture, the people, to the point where I even started to learn Mayan, like because I really started to like I just wanted to be fully be Mexican as much as possible. So the Mexico standard for me is that like I still like inconveniences. I don't want everything to be perfect. Where so for instance, sometimes maybe there might not be electricity. That's fine. Like I could do a couple of hours without electricity, or maybe if I open up the tap, it's not hot water and it's cold water. I want some of those little like I know it's weird to say, but I actually like some of those inconveniences like
Mhm.
in my day-to-day life. But also I have the modern you know access and stuff as well. That is a Mexican standard to me, which
Yeah, that's
I think
true.
Bali gets some of it, but I don't feel at home in Bali, sadly.
I know. Yeah, I was actually having this conversation with a friend at dinner. Because of all this construction going on in Singapore, I had to make like a 47-minute walk detour because I couldn't just jaywalk across the road and cross the highway. Well, that would have ended me.
Stop.
Yeah, so
Really?
I'm like, dude, I'm more used to this lawless society where I can kind of just do whatever I want. And maybe that's the reason. Yeah, I love Latin America and I love Bali as well. And I think that's the reason why I feel more comfortable kind of like bending the rules in more developing countries. I know I'm very privileged coming from like first world Asian country. Um, but you know, sometimes it's easier to I mean it's nice to live life a little looser. And that's why
Yeah.
yeah, Mexico is great. When I lived in Puerto Escondido, it's the surfing capital in Mexico, and it was very laid back. So for me, I really enjoyed the laid back, the chill life. Even in Oaxaca, everything is very slow. It's
Hmm.
very cultured. Everyone's very polite. And yeah, for sure, the culture is completely different culture as from where I came from. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think for me it's weird. I still like a fast-paced life, but with a bit of like culture. You know, like in the States, it almost feels like ugh, it's weird, but there's not really much of a culture, I feel like. Or it has a culture, it's just a different kind of culture. I shouldn't say there's no culture. There is a culture in the States, but it's a different kind of mentality. And I actually think that also helps when I'm in like places like say Mexico or Bali because you have this hustle mindset, which can actually be a very big benefit or advantage for you compared to like maybe some of the locals that you're around. But then yeah, you really had to be careful with that though, so that you don't burn yourself out doing too much. And like maybe you're in a culture where everyone's so slow paced and you're so fast paced and you expect things to be done a certain way, you can have a lot of like clash. Like
Mm.
you know, in Bali for instance, people are so chill, right? Like even though people are working, everyone's working on the laptop or whatever, but people are still so lazy. And so like I literally felt like not productive in Bali. I don't know why. It's just the
Yeah.
culture. It's so chill.
I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I feel like the more developed a country is, the more stressed they become, um, the more inward they are, versus something that's more developing, something that's closer to nature, something that's simpler. They're a lot more content with what they have. Of course, the pace of life is slower. People are more warm and hospitable, and that's what I really, really like about living closer to nature and closer to developing places like that.
Okay, and I kind of go wanted to go off what you were saying about Mexico, and I think one of the biggest differences you see in Mexico versus U.S. is in Mexico, and probably some Asian countries and as well. People are a lot more family oriented. So I mean,
Absolutely.
everyone does events together. They get together with families on weekends. They'll go out to the park. They'll walk around the cathedral or Central Square, and everyone will do stuff together. Whereas in the US, like, yeah, there are parks and stuff, but everyone's kind of doing their own thing. They're not usually out there with families as much. They kind of meet
Mm.
in the bars or the houses or stuff. You don't see them out as much in the parks or maybe in public areas as much. And that's one thing I noticed a lot in Mexico. And I think because they are more family oriented, it really adds to the culture, and it makes you kind of feel like more welcomed. And of course, it's better for like people watching and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's one thing I really appreciate about Mexico Zoo compared to being in the United States.
Yeah. Oh, we've got a question from Inka's friend KO abroad. What has been the biggest challenge you guys have faced when traveling, or rather like living in Mexico or Bali?
Mhm. Oof.
I guess sometimes, of course, in Mexico and a lot of countries, you have to deal with bureaucracy a little bit. So it's just like sometimes you just got to sit there and wait. And sometimes it's like, oh, you don't have this form, you have to come back tomorrow with this form, or you and then you go try to go grab that form and come back and you missed your reservation. Okay, you have to make another appointment. So I mean, but that's just part of life in Mexico. I've come to accept that. So sometimes you have to make those extra trips to the bank or tax office, like I did when I was starting my business, kind of get everything in a row. But yeah, that's part of life here, and you just got to have a lot of patience.
Yeah, on that point, especially from us coming from developed countries, we are used to efficiency. We are used to every like customer service working 7 days a week. And so I think in Latin America, when I was staying there, they close on Saturdays and Sundays, and it's impossible to get through to them on a phone call because they don't use WhatsApp. We don't have a local number, or we don't speak the language. And so it really teaches us to be patient, and it really, yeah, just teaches us to really be okay with spending more time than usual, to slow down a bit. I think that is one of the challenge, I would say, with living in more developing country. And I guess the other one is language for me, especially in Latin
Mhm.
America. If I wasn't traveling with someone that spoke Spanish, I probably wouldn't have done it on my own.
I was gonna say, for me, one of the challenges the biggest challenge I think I'd say I faced living in Mexico is the fact that I'm black and I'm solo. I get pulled over by policia 9.5 times out of 10, like genuinely. Yeah, so it's actually kind of sad, but it's different from the US. Though in Mexico, it's racial profiling and and it's from ignorance, and also due to the fact like the media that they're seeing. So they're seeing a lot of American media. So there's a way we as black, especially as a black man, are being portrayed. And this is the more reason why representation is important in like say social media and stuff like that, and so that our voices are being put out there. But yeah, like I get pulled over quite a lot. And there was one time I was really just walking from the bus stop and I was going to the house, and the cops literally drove right beside me and they were like, "Where's your drugs?" And I just give right back to them. I was like, "Do I look like I have drugs?" Blah blah blah. And like I speak Spanish, right? So and I get very aggressive. Like once they start to like interrogate me, because I'm like I've not done anything. So I have my rights. And once they hear me start to speak Spanish, then they're like, "Oh shoot, this is like a local. This is not like a gringo." So because I have a bit of a Spanish, like a Mexican accent, a bit. So like they actually tone down, and then they're like, "Oh shoot, yeah, okay." And then so usually I've had a couple of pleasant experiences actually, but I get pulled over quite a lot, and that was the only downside of say Mexico. Living in Bali, I'd say for me, the downside I had, the biggest challenge I had was with the the Hindu culture, being a Christian, like spiritual thing. I just felt like I didn't really feel at peace. I always felt like I was constantly fighting some sort of a war, spiritually. So I just never really felt calm, at like genuinely at peace in Bali. So that was, I would say, the biggest challenge I had. Two different, very types of experiences, but I felt accepted in Bali. Like I never once feared for like being a black man or anything. Not once. That didn't even ever cross my mind. Like felt great, great place for black people. It's just the spiritual part that I felt very disconnected with Bali.
Yeah, Bali is definitely very inclusive. You can find all sorts of people there. It's great for making friends while if you're traveling solo, which is a topic we covered in the previous week. So you can tune into our previous week's live 2 weeks ago, actually. Yeah,
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago. And so so I think Bali is great for, like beginners, people wanting to try it out for the first time, because everything is accessible there. The only issue with living abroad, like, which is one of the reasons why I am hesitant about constantly moving around, is just the whole logistical things of having to decide where to stay, where's the best neighborhood, what are the communities to join, where can I find my gym or my yoga studio, or how do I get around, things like that. So initially, it definitely needs a lot of there's a lot of research required, but I guess it helps to start at places where it's already populated with nomads or people who live abroad, like Mexico or Bali.
Correct.
Yeah. Mm.
What challenges, Belle, do you face actually as a female traveling and say, like between Bali and Mexico, for instance? What were your biggest challenges?
I felt okay. I mean, Bali is in Asia, so already there are a lot of Asians visiting, whether they're coming from Singapore or Jakarta or like Korea, Japan. There's a lot of Asians, so I feel like I kind of blend in. Whereas when I was in, was it Mexico? Maybe not Mexico. Mexico, I feel like everyone's. Oh no, there was one time I was harassed because I was a female, but that's another story for another time. But like, okay, anyway, I'll just tell it. I was living in Puerto Escondido. I was kind of on this like residential neighborhood. I took a shortcut. It wasn't like a dark alley or anything. It was broad daylight. I was walking home after like buying some takeout from a cafe, and then suddenly this guy kind of he appears out of nowhere. He like squished my butt and he ran off.
No way.
So yeah, yes way. I didn't even get a look at him. So
Random
these are
out
the
of nowhere.
yeah,
That's
these are the
also
kind of
sad.
things. Ooh, these are the kind of things you meet when you're traveling as a female solo female, I guess. But as an Asian, where was I? Maybe in the Dominican Republic, and it was during the pandemic, so there were no travelers around, much less Asians. So people kind of just come up to me and say like, "Oh, konnichiwa," things like that, which I'm fine about. Like they're just curious about my skin color, I guess, and why I look the way I look, which I don't mind. I enjoy. I mean, I not that I enjoy, yeah, but I mean, it's harmless.
It's not a problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem. So for the most part, I think everyone's very friendly and helpful, as long as you're not too, like, as long as you present yourself in a harmless way and just genuinely wanting to get information, get help. I think people will very happily help you. Even in Paris, when there's this misconception that people are very unfriendly to strangers or foreigners that don't speak French. I could still get instructions. I could still get help with directions on the train.
I couldn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
No.
crazy
I
how
struggled
people
in
have like
Paris.
stereotypes of different people.
Well, in Paris, I would just switch to Spanish, and then they would reply to me in English, so it worked out. I tried that a few times and it worked.
I
Yeah,
tried
learning
the
the
whole
local
Spanish
Not for
language.
thing.
everyone.
I tried the Spanish thing and it didn't work for me. It was
Oh,
sadly it's not the greatest experience. But then I had a friend from Paris that was like, you have to come back for another experience to kind of have like a local-ish. Then that was much better. But solo traveling, nah.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, I think we've covered pretty much all of things about living in Mexico versus Bali. Do we want to add anything else?
Yeah, I think it's important to like maybe for each of us, like maybe we could talk about like say pros and cons. Well, at least me and Belle probably we could talk about some pros and cons
Mm.
of say living in Bali versus Mexico. And Nate, you could talk about maybe some pros and cons of I know you've talked a bit about Mexico, but like what's a big pro and con of Mexico versus the States?
Well, yeah, and I kind of guess going back before, I guess Mexico's very family oriented. So, and
Mhm.
there's, I think that that's a very very big pro. And oh, there's also something I wanted to add. I think no matter where you go, wherever you're traveling, wherever you're living, even if you just know like a few words of the local language, even if you're like Bali, Mexico, Argentina, Slovakia, wherever, I think that makes like a big difference and how
Mhm.
people act and respond to you. And I think in most cases, it definitely it improves your experience in that country, even if you just know like a few local words or have like a few snippets of local knowledge. I know for me, like I've been in Mexico for a while, and so every time I meet Mexicans, they're always very surprised about like how much I know about Guadalajara, how much I know about Mexico, and it's fun to see their reactions, and it's another good way to make like local friends just like having this knowledge and knowing about this, knowing about that. Have you been there? Have you been here? Like and it's I think it definitely makes a big difference once it's even if you haven't been there a long time, just knowing like oh I like this kind of food or I like going to this place or this place. I think people are
Mhm.
appreciative when you have some knowledge about their country and you make an attempt to like I guess appreciate it and I guess be a part of it. So
Mhm. For
Nice.
me, for me, time zone location is definitely a big factor. Knowing that I have to be home pretty often, so Bali is like an easy choice for me. But if I had a choice, I mean, I really liked my experience living in Latin America, where I was there for almost 2 years. I think that's where me and Nate connected because he was running some tours in somewhere
yeah,
where
I
I
was kind of
was,
traveling and then yeah, doing some hiking and doing some stuff there. But
yeah,
they
hiking.
close like misconnections like where we were
Yeah, we never got to meet in
being in the
person.
same city. So but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, I really like Latin America, Mexico. I have always wanted to go back there because Mexico is so big. It's
Mhm.
I guess the thing that deters me is like, yeah, one, access to Mexico from Singapore. It's a bit inconvenient. And then two, now that I'm going to be traveling on my own, am I going to make it out on my own with my limited knowledge of Spanish? That's the thing. But I feel safer in Mexico knowing that I've been there before and knowing that there's a huge expat community. Like in Playa del Carmen, when I was there, literally every
Mhm.
single person was a nomad. I don't even know if there were locals there. It's pretty much like a tourist slash nomad town. Um, so like if you really didn't want to totally get out of your comfort zone, you could start with places like that. Um,
Mhm.
and Mexico actually like the more developed cities, I would say like even Mexico City or Cancun, everyone speaks English, so it's not that
Mhm.
hard to assimilate into.
Absolutely. I was gonna say, adding on to yours, I was gonna say like a pro for me, say like with Mexico, for instance. So I would choose Mexico over Bali. One, because Mexico is just closer to Canada, US.
Mm.
It's just, yeah, the
Yeah, the
accessibility is
similar
just
time
there.
zones definitely helps. Uh,
Absolutely. Because now, like, say I'm in Bali, I'm working American. I'm not working American time hours, but then I'm working for American Canadian companies. So communications actually it's just way difficult, to be honest. Like, it's really challenging. But you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. Another pro again is for Mexico food, especially
Mm.
being plant-based. I turned plant-based in Mexico. So uh Mexico actually did not prepare me really well for the world, because like, especially Tulum, like there's a lot of vegan options in Tulum where I could see eat like
What?
Mexican food. Yeah, in Tulum. But then I went to the States right after, turning plant-based in Tulum, and it was trash. Like, I tried to get tacos in the States, vegan tacos. It was just terrible. It was literally onions
Really?
and like cilantro, and that was it. It was terrible. For $6 for three. So food is a big pro for me. Then another pro, I'd say last pro would be affordability, the cost of living. Pretty affordable, especially if you're making American dollars or Canadian dollars, foreign currency there, then it's a lot more affordable, I'd say, Mexico versus, um, you know, say Canada or the States and stuff. And then for Bali, yeah, I would say for if I were to pick Bali, Bali, I'd just say right now, and there'll definitely be more cons just because with the amount of construction that's going on, it's way too much like tourism. That's like Mexico is so big that it could fit a lot of people, and you don't feel um stuck with just tourists. In Bali, you almost feel like you have to always like you're always gonna be across a lot of tourists and not. It's hard, and with the construction, it's just crazy, and then the mere fact that it's just so far away from everyone else is also a big con. But Mexico, I mean Bali, I would have to say also has probably some of the freshest fruits and
Oh yeah,
natural like foods
tropical.
as well, and very affordable like anywhere that
Yeah.
I've been.
Yeah, Bali definitely also has a lot of plant-based, healthy food choices around, and that's one of the reasons why I
Absolutely.
really love the wellness and the health scene there.
Hmm.
Accessibility, I feel like you can just rent a scooter and get anywhere you want.
Hmm.
Whereas Mexico is a bit bigger. Well, it depends.
Yeah.
I guess it depends it varies from city to city. But I like that Bali, you can just rent a bike and you can scoot anywhere you want. The other point, oh, I wanted to add on the construction bit because it's funny now when people are looking for places to stay. One of their requirements is no construction noises, please. Because more often than not, like the first place that I stayed at, the construction was happening just beside my
Hmm.
guest house. So you either get used to chickens clucking or construction noises waking you up. Um,
Yep.
yeah, but one other point I wanted to add was that I like that Mexico has a 6-month visa for just tourists versus
Hmm.
in Bali as a tourist maximum you probably get to stay only 2 months.
30 days, an extension, yeah, 2 months,
Yeah,
which
indeed.
kind of sucks for a lot of because you're traveling so far away. Just of course, there's way around it. And for people who don't know, you just have to do visa runs and stuff. But yeah, it's very, very inconvenient where like and the immigration process is just way too complicated. And I know they're trying to like make it more strict and whatever, but it's not necessary.
Yeah. Cool, cool. I think we're good. We're like approaching an hour, so let's wrap it up. It's been great. Thanks for coming with us, Nate. It's been great to hear your perception living in Guadalajara. Like you're actually living in
Yeah, it
Mexico
was fun
now.
to come on, and yeah, there's definitely lots of things to like about Mexico, and yeah, as you're kind of saying, Mexico. I mean, there's a lot of the pros and cons are similar to what you might get in another country, but I think you can say there's, for me at least, there's definitely way more pros than cons to being in
Absolutely.
for sure.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and
yeah,
can't go
yeah.
wrong with Mexican food. So.
Never.
Mm, that's true. Awesome. Yeah, we do this weekly live stream. We share tips about travel. We talk about, traveling as a minority, either a female Asian or a black male. We talk about relationships when traveling, health, solo travel tips, things like that. So let us know what you want to hear in the next live stream. We usually come on Tuesday at the same time. Otherwise, feel free to check out our profiles. Have any questions about living in Mexico or Bali, or in Inca's case, Australia, you can drop us a message. Otherwise, we will see you in the next live stream. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Let me end the stream.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Nate.